In this video, we'll be going over the CAD functionality within OptimumCNC Plasma software. CAD, or computer-aided design, allows the operator to design their own parts and shapes that can later be imported into OptimumCNC software. To access the CAD window, go into CAM, and then switch to CAD at the top right here. Here we'll first go over some of the common functionality and features in this top ribbon, as well as the snap tools, and then we'll go over some of the buttons and what they're used for. So first we have our open and save project buttons. So let's say I have some kind of a project that I've already worked on, I've saved it, perhaps I'll design something right now and save it, and then I'd like to open it again in the future. This is the way to do it. Next we have the image button. This opens up a separate window that allows us to import some kind of a sample image that will then be essentially transcribed by the software into some combination of segments that can then be edited and imported. However, we're not going to touch this for now, as this will be a topic for its own separate video. To the right we have our grid, so this is simply the size of the grid that we're currently using. And this comes in handy if, for instance, we're using a tool such as Snap to Grid. So right now, let's say I have some kind of a large grid of, let's say, 1 inch. It's very easy to see that as I move the mouse essentially snaps to my grid. If I disable this, I can freely draw wherever I want. Next we have snap to point. Let's say I have already drawn some part that has these 4 points for the rectangle. I disable snap to grid and I have snap to point enabled. So when I bring my mouse close to an existing point, it will essentially be drawn to it to overlap. And last but not least, we have the snap to tangent. So let's say I have some kind of a circle. Let's say I draw a line with a snap to tangent enabled, and it will create a tangent line. Next, we'll go over a quick rundown of what each of these buttons does. So here we have our select button. It allows us to select an existing drawing, and within this button we have a number of tools. So a tool such as select, move, delete, mirror, horizontally and vertically, copy, rotate, and scale. And we'll go into some detail on each of them maybe later, as we are designing a sample part. However, for now, what you should be aware of is that they are available once you click on this select button. Next we have arc, which allows us to draw some kind of an arc with some kind of a radius. We have a circle of some given radius. We have a rectangle, a free line, so we can essentially add as many segments as we want. A tangent to 2 circles, which will go into some detail in the example that I'll be using, and a text button. Below it we have some operations that we can take with the existing shapes, such as subdivide circle into a number of splits or segments, the ability to cut segments, the ability to find intersections, and the chamfer tool, which includes the ability to select a chamfer or some kind of a rounded circle with an inside or an outside radius. So now we're more or less familiar with the layout of this window. Let's take a look at this example that I've prepared and drawn by hand, so we have something to design within the CAD window. So here we have what essentially is two circles that are connected by essentially two tangent lines, a smaller circle on the inside, a rectangle with some rounded corners, and number 1 here. So let's go back into our CAD software and start designing. I'm going to lower the grid size so it's a little bit more manageable, and I will add two circles, one with a radius of 5 and another with a radius of 3. And right now I'm not terribly concerned with the exact dimensions of this sample part, because I'm simply trying to illustrate the way that the buttons function. We're also going to add another circle of radius 3 right here, and then we're going to create a tangent line. We do it by selecting our tangent function here, by enabling this button, and then selecting circle 1 and circle 2. And we have drawn a line between those two circles. We can similarly create another tangent line by clicking on circle 1, circle 2. And after, we can simply delete the segments that we do not want by selecting the cut button and then clicking on the highlighted segment. Next, we can add some kind of a rectangle with rounded squares, and I'm going to do it in a couple different ways, one of which is easier and faster than the other. However, I'm going to do it in a variety of ways simply to illustrate the way that you can design something like this. So first of all, of course, what you can simply do is create some kind of a rectangle, perhaps a rectangle of a size of maybe, let's say, 2 by 2. Let's say we then think that it's actually a little smaller than we'd like, and we'd like to scale it up. Well, we'll select it, go into our scaling functionality here, enter the scaling factor, let's say maybe 1.2 perhaps, and scale it up. Next, we're going to go into our chamfer tool and select the operation that we'd like to perform to these 4 corners. So here I'd like to create a rounded corner with some kind of a radius, perhaps 0.4. After I've selected this button, I can simply click on the 4 corners to essentially make them rounded. And next, what we're going to do is simply rotate this part by selecting it, and by either entering the rotation angle, let's say 45, or by rotating it by hand. So let's say I'd like to rotate it by hand. I'd simply rotate it like this. However, here I don't really need to rotate it anymore, it's already rotated. So we're simply going to move it to our desired spot right here. So now we already have something that looks more or less like our shape in the drawing. And since I've promised to show another way of designing this square, we're going to delete it for now and simply design it using the free line, which is actually the more complicated method in this case. However, let's say you have a shape that is more complicated and not available within this ribbon, like the circle or the rectangle, then maybe you'll need the free line and perhaps the arc functionality. So here, all I'm going to do is, once again, design some kind of a rectangle, let's say 2.5 for our sides. And next, all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add an arc for these corners. So let's say an arc of some radius, perhaps like so. And we're going to repeat this roughly for the other corners as well. But when we are done with this, there's going to be a question of how do we actually cut this out. Because let's say we go to our cut functionality and highlight this section right here. You can see that the whole line gets highlighted, so if we were to click on it, it would essentially delete the whole line. So we don't want that. Instead, what we want to do is we want to find an intersection of this arc and this line right here. So now, after we found this intersection for all 4 lines, we essentially have a number of smaller segments that we can then delete. There we go. Now, similarly, we're simply going to rotate this part right here by some angle, let's say 45 degrees, hopefully, if I can select it. There we go. And move it once again to our desired spot. Next, we're simply going to add a number 1 right here. We can play around with the size of this number, and we can play around with the exact font. However, I think this font right here works well. After we've moved it to our desired location, we can simply press Enter, and it will be added to our design. So here we have a drawing that we can then, let's say, save. Let's call it Project Test 01. And save it, and we can later open it when needed. After this, we can simply import this drawing into our CAM window, so this can now be edited. Let's see, we can edit the leads, we can edit the positioning of this with regards to, let's see, other parts that we have imported from either an existing DXF file, our shapes, etc. And once we're satisfied with everything here, let's see, we have actually lowered the lead size a little bit, perhaps lowered our curve. Once we're satisfied, we can confirm, and it will be imported into OptimumCNC and can then be cut. So I hope this covers the basics of CAD functionality. There are much more complicated designs that you can draw within it. However, at its core, it's a simple and robust way of quickly drawing a part or a shape that you can then import into the software. Thank you for watching.